Your brain is slowly decaying, and you do not even notice it. You protect your house. You protect your bank account, but you leave your most valuable asset completely untrained and vulnerable. You blame your forgetfulness on aging, but the truth is far more dangerous. Your mind is literally shrinking because you have stopped forcing it to struggle. You wake up in the morning with the quiet intention to start the day right, just a few minutes. That's all you tell yourself. You reach for your phone, not out of urgency, but out of habit. Notifications, messages, news, a quick scroll. Nothing important, just checking, just staying updated. And then something subtle happens. Your mind begins to fragment. 5 minutes turns into 20. 20 turns into 40. You don't even notice the transition. There is no clear moment where you decide to stop thinking and start drifting. It just happens. By the time you finally put the phone down, something already feels off. You haven't done anything physically exhausting. You haven't solved any complex problem. But your mind already feels crowded, slightly dull, slightly slower than it should be. Think about that. The day hasn't even started, and your cognitive energy is already partially spent. Now you sit down to do something meaningful. Maybe it's reading. Maybe it's planning your work. Maybe it's trying to learn something new. You read a paragraph. Halfway through, your attention slips. You go back and read it again. And again. The words are simple. You understand the language. But your mind refuses to hold on to meaning. And that's when the quiet frustration begins. You start wondering if something is wrong with you. You forget names more often. You lose your train of thought mid-sentence. You walk into a room and pause, trying to remember why you went there in the first place. This didn't happen 10 years ago. Back then, your mind felt sharper, faster, more responsive. Now, everything feels slightly delayed. Not broken, just degraded. And here's the dangerous part. It feels normal, because it's gradual. There is no dramatic collapse. No sudden loss. Just a slow erosion that blends into daily life so seamlessly that you stop questioning it. Let me ask you something. When was the last time you sat with a single task, no phone, no interruptions, and stayed fully focused for 30 minutes straight, not switching tabs, not checking messages, not reaching for stimulation the moment things became slightly difficult? 30 minutes of uninterrupted cognitive effort. If you hesitate to answer that, you're not alone. This is where most adults find themselves now. Not lazy, not incapable, just mentally scattered. You go through an entire day responding to inputs, emails, notifications, conversations, small tasks, quick decisions. By the end of the day, you feel exhausted. But when you look back, there's nothing substantial to show for it. No deep work. No meaningful progress. Just a trail of reactions. Here's a familiar scene. It's evening. You're sitting on the couch. You feel tired, but not satisfied. Your brain feels full, but not sharp. You pick up your phone again. Scroll. Video after video. Information without depth. Stimulation without effort. An hour passes. Then another. And at some point, a quiet thought appears. What did I actually do today? That question lingers longer than you want it to. because you know the answer. Very little that required real thinking. Very little that pushed your mind. Very little that made you grow. And yet, you feel completely drained. This is the paradox of modern mental fatigue. You are exhausted without being fulfilled. Your brain is constantly active, but rarely engaged at a meaningful level. And over time, this creates something far more dangerous than simple distraction. It creates a mind that becomes uncomfortable with effort, a mind that avoids difficulty, a mind that begins to prefer the easy, the quick, the instantly rewarding. Let me ask you another question. When you encounter something challenging, something that requires deep thinking, do you lean into it, or do you feel an immediate urge to escape, to check something, to switch tasks, to delay? That urge is not random. It is trained. Day after day, moment after moment, you are being conditioned to avoid cognitive strain. And the cost of that conditioning is not immediately visible. It doesn't show up as a dramatic failure. It shows up as subtle decline, slower thinking, weaker memory, shorter attention span, less mental endurance, and eventually a quiet loss of confidence in your own mind. Most people blame this on age. They say, "I'm just getting older." But that explanation is too convenient, because it removes responsibility. And more importantly, it hides a real problem. The truth is, your brain is not failing you. It is adapting to how you are using it, or more accurately, how you are no longer using it. And this is where the conversation becomes uncomfortable. Because if your current state is not inevitable, then it is reversible. And if it is reversible, then it means something else entirely. It means that what you're experiencing right now is not decline. It is neglect. Most people never question what is happening to their mind. They notice the symptoms. They feel the slowdown, the forgetfulness, the inability to stay focused. But they rarely investigate the mechanism behind it. Instead, they reach for the most convenient explanation available. I'm just getting older. It sounds reasonable. It sounds harmless. But it is also deeply misleading, because it suggests that cognitive decline is natural, unavoidable, and outside of your control. And that belief is where the real damage begins. Let me be precise. Your brain does not deteriorate randomly with age. It adapts relentlessly, efficiently, without emotion. Every single day, your brain is running a biological optimization process. It is constantly asking one question: what is being used and what is not? And based on that answer, it makes structural decisions. This process is called synaptic pruning, and it is far more aggressive than most people realize. When a neural pathway is used frequently, when you struggle to understand something, when you recall information from memory, when you engage in deep thinking, those connections are strengthened. They become faster, more efficient, more accessible. But when a pathway is not used, it is not preserved. It is eliminated. Not metaphorically, physically. The brain removes the connections that are no longer necessary. Think about that. Your brain is not just failing to grow. It is actively deleting parts of itself based on your behavior. And this is where the modern environment becomes dangerous, because your daily routine is no longer designed to stimulate deep thinking. It is designed to eliminate the need for it. You don't memorize directions anymore. You use GPS. You don't recall information. You search for it. You don't sit with a difficult concept. You skim, scroll, and move on the moment friction appears. At first, this feels like efficiency. It feels like progress. Why struggle to remember when everything is instantly available? Why think deeply when answers are one tap away? But beneath that convenience, a trade is being made. You are outsourcing your cognition, and your brain is responding accordingly. Let me ask you something. If you stop using your memory completely, if you relied entirely on external tools, why would your brain continue to maintain strong memory systems? It wouldn't. It would down-regulate them, gradually, silently. And this is exactly what is happening. Now layer something else on top of this. Dopamine. Every time you check your phone, scroll through content, or switch between tasks, your brain receives a small reward, a hit of stimulation, not intense enough to feel dramatic, but frequent enough to reshape your baseline. Over time, your brain becomes accustomed to constant novelty, constant input, constant reward. And this creates a problem, because deep thinking does not feel like that. Reading a complex idea is slow. Solving a problem is effortful. Learning something new is frustrating. There is no immediate reward, no quick spike, just sustained effort. And when your brain has been conditioned to expect constant stimulation, that kind of effort feels uncomfortable, even painful. This is called dopamine desensitization. Your brain's reward system becomes less responsive to low stimulation activities and more dependent on high-frequency input. The result? You lose your tolerance for cognitive friction. You begin to avoid anything that requires sustained attention. Not consciously, automatically. You open a book, and within minutes, you feel restless. You start a task, and suddenly, you feel the urge to check something. Not because you need to, but because your brain is seeking relief. Relief from effort. Relief from stillness. Relief from thinking. And this is where it becomes dangerous, because now your environment and your biology are working together in the same direction, toward ease, toward convenience, toward minimal effort. But your brain does not grow in ease. It grows in resistance, in struggle, in effort. Let me give you a simple comparison. If you stop using a muscle, it weakens, not because you are aging, but because you are not applying stress. The brain follows the same principle. No challenge, no growth. No strain, no strength. And yet, most people structure their entire day around avoiding strain. They wake up and immediately consume. They move through the day reacting instead of thinking. They end the day seeking more stimulation to escape the fatigue created by that very pattern. It is a closed loop, a self-reinforcing system of mental weakening. Let me ask you another question. When was the last time you forced yourself to sit with something difficult, not until you understood it, but until it stopped being uncomfortable? Most people never reach that point. They leave too early. They escape the moment resistance appears. And every time they do, they reinforce the same pattern. Effort equals discomfort. Discomfort equals avoidance. Avoidance becomes habit. And habit becomes identity. I can't focus. I'm not as sharp as I used to be. I just don't have the mental energy. These statements feel true, but they are not fixed traits. They are trained responses. built over time, reinforced daily. And here's the part that most people never see. Your brain is not just adapting to what you do. It is adapting to what you avoid. Every time you choose convenience over effort, every time you replace thinking with searching, every time you escape, instead of engaging, you are teaching your brain a very specific lesson. This level of effort is not required. And your brain listens. It adjusts. It reduces capacity where capacity is not needed. And slowly, almost invisibly, you become less capable of doing the very things you once did with ease. Not because you are aging, but because you have stopped demanding more from your mind. Think about that carefully. Because once you see it, you cannot unsee it. This is not decline. This is adaptation in the wrong direction. And if you don't interrupt this process, it will continue. Quietly, consistently, until the version of you that was once sharp, focused, and mentally resilient feels like someone you used to know. Benjamin Franklin was not born with a superior mind. That is the part most people misunderstand. They look at the outcome, his writing, his inventions, his influence, and assume talent was a foundation. It wasn't. What made Franklin exceptional was something far less comfortable and far more replicable. He deliberately made thinking difficult for himself. While most people seek clarity, ease, and confirmation, Franklin sought friction, intellectual friction. He did not read to agree. He read to challenge his own assumptions. He would take an argument he believed in and then actively search for the strongest opposing view, not to dismiss it, but to understand it deeply enough that it forced him to rethink his position. Think about that. Most people today scroll through information that reinforces what they already believe. Franklin did the opposite. He exposed himself to cognitive resistance on purpose. And then he went further. He didn't just consume ideas. He reconstructed them. He would read complex material, close the book, and then attempt to rewrite the entire concept in his own words, from memory, not by copying, not by glancing back, by forcing his mind to retrieve, organize, and articulate the idea as if he were teaching it. That process is uncomfortable. It reveals gaps. It exposes confusion. It forces effort. And that is exactly why he did it, because he understood something most people avoid. Clarity is not found in ease. It is built through struggle. Let me ask you something. When you read something today, an article, a book, even a post, do you ever close it and try to explain it without looking? Or do you move on immediately to the next piece of information? That difference matters more than you think. Because one builds knowledge. The other creates the illusion of it. Franklin also practiced something even more rare. He slowed down. In a world without digital distraction, he still treated attention as a limited resource. He would focus on a single idea for extended periods of time, turning it over, examining it from different angles, questioning it, refining it. He was not interested in volume. He was interested in depth. Now, compare that to the modern pattern. You read quickly. You skim. You jump between ideas. You consume 10 different inputs in the time it takes to deeply process one. And at the end, you feel informed. But when you try to recall or apply what you consume, there's nothing solid there. Just fragments. Franklin avoided this entirely. Not because he had more time, but because he had more discipline over how he used his mind. And here is what becomes even more important. He maintained this approach into old age. He did not slow down intellectually. He did not default to comfort. He continued to seek complexity, to engage with difficult ideas, to stretch his thinking beyond what was easy or familiar. While others gradually reduced their cognitive demands, he sustained them, and his brain responded accordingly. Because the brain does not care about your age. It cares about your input, your level of challenge, your willingness to engage. Franklin's mind remained sharp because he never stopped requiring it to be. Now contrast that with what happens today. As people get older, they unconsciously simplify their cognitive environment. They stop learning new skills. They avoid difficult material. They rely more on tools, shortcuts, and routines, not because they have to, but because it feels easier. And over time, that ease becomes limitation. Their world becomes smaller. Their thinking becomes narrower. Their mental flexibility decreases, not from age but from lack of use. Franklin chose the opposite path. He treated his mind like something that needed to be trained, not occasionally, but consistently, and not through comfort, but through controlled discomfort. Let me be clear. This was not about intensity. He was not working endlessly. He was working deliberately. There's a difference. Intensity burns out. Deliberate strain builds capacity. And this is where most people go wrong. They believe that improving their mind requires more time, more information, more effort. But what it actually requires is more friction, more resistance, more moments where your brain is forced to stretch beyond what is easy. Let me ask you directly. Do you structure your day in a way that challenges your thinking or in a way that protects you from it? Because that answer determines everything. Franklin did not leave his mental development to chance. He engineered it through habits, through constraints, through intentional difficulty. And over time, those small, consistent acts of cognitive strain compounded into something extraordinary. Not because he was different, but because his system was. And this is the part that matters most. You do not need Franklin's intellect. You need his approach, because the same principle still applies. Your brain will become exactly as strong as the demands you place on it. No more. No less. And right now, most people are demanding almost nothing. By now, you can probably feel it. Not just understand it, but recognize it in your own life. Because this isn't theoretical. This is happening to you in real time, every single day. And the reason it feels so difficult to control is because you are not dealing with random behavior. You are operating inside a system. A loop. Precise. Predictable. Reinforced. And once you see this loop clearly, you start to understand why willpower alone has never been enough. Because you are not breaking habits. You are interrupting a system that has been quietly training you. Let's slow this down. Every behavior you repeat follows the same underlying pattern. Trigger. Craving. Response. Reward. It sounds simple, but its simplicity is what makes it powerful. You wake up in the morning. That's the trigger. There's a moment of stillness. A small gap before the day begins. And inside that gap, something uncomfortable appears. A slight emptiness. A lack of stimulation. Your brain, already conditioned by constant input, interprets that silence as something to fix. That's the craving. Not for information, not for productivity, for stimulation, for something to fill the space. And almost automatically, your hand moves. You reach for your phone. That's the response. No decision, no deliberation, just execution. And then comes a reward. A stream of novelty, messages, news, content, movement. Each piece gives you a small hit of dopamine. Not enough to overwhelm you, but enough to reinforce behavior. And here's the critical part. Your brain does not evaluate whether this behavior is good for you. It only tracks one thing. Did this reduce discomfort? Yes. So it strengthens the loop. Trigger craving response reward. Again, and again, and again. Now, extend this beyond the morning. You sit down to work. You open a document. Within minutes, the task becomes slightly difficult. That's the trigger. The moment friction appears, your brain doesn't interpret this as growth. It interprets it as discomfort. And because it has been trained to resolve discomfort quickly, a craving appears. Check something. Switch tasks. Relieve the pressure. You open a new tab. Check your email. Scroll for a moment. That's the response. And immediately, the discomfort disappears. That's the reward. Relief, not progress. Relief. Think about that distinction. You are not being rewarded for doing meaningful work. You are being rewarded for escaping it. And over time, that rewires your entire relationship with effort. Effort becomes something to avoid. Relief becomes something to seek. And slowly, without realizing it, you begin to structure your day around minimizing cognitive strain. Let me give you a simple but revealing scenario. You sit down to read something important. A book, a report, something that actually matters. Within 2 minutes, your attention starts to drift. You feel the urge to check your phone. You resist for a moment. Then you give in. Just a quick check. That quick check turns into 10 minutes. Then 15. And when you come back to the page, you've lost the thread completely. So you start again, and the cycle repeats. This is not a lack of intelligence. It is a trained behavioral loop, and it becomes even more dangerous when you look at memory, because memory depends on effort. Your hippocampus, the part of your brain responsible for forming and retrieving memories, activates most strongly when you struggle to recall information, not when you see it. When you retrieve it, but in your current system, retrieval is rarely required. You don't try to remember. You search. You don't hold information. You store it externally. Your phone becomes your memory. Your calendar becomes your planner. Your search engine becomes your knowledge base. And again, this feels efficient. But your brain is adapting. If retrieval is not required, retrieval capacity weakens. Synaptic strength decreases. Memory becomes less reliable. And then something subtle happens. You stop trusting your own mind. You double-check everything. You rely even more on external systems. And that reinforces a loop even further. Let me ask you something. If your phone disappeared tomorrow, how much of your daily life could you manage from memory alone? Not approximately. Precisely. because that answer reveals how much of your cognitive responsibility you have outsourced. And this is where the system becomes self-reinforcing. The more you outsource, the less you retain. The less you retain, the more you outsource. And the cycle continues. Now combine this with constant stimulation. Your brain is receiving input all day. Messages, updates, content, noise. There is no space, no silence, no time for consolidation. And without consolidation, learning does not solidify. It evaporates. You experience information, but you do not integrate it. You feel busy, but you do not build depth. And over time, this creates a very specific state. Mental fatigue without mental growth. You are tired because your brain is constantly active, but you are not improving because that activity lacks structure, depth, and resistance. Let me say that again. You are not exhausted because you are doing too much meaningful work. You are exhausted because your attention is being pulled in too many shallow directions. Fragmentation is draining, not effort. And this is where most people get it wrong. They try to solve this by resting more, by taking breaks, by disconnecting temporarily. But the problem is not the absence of rest. It is the absence of disciplined engagement. Your brain is not tired from challenge. It is tired from chaos. And unless you change the system, nothing changes, because the loop will continue to run. Automatically, silently, efficiently. You will wake up, reach for your phone, fragment your attention, avoid difficulty, seek relief, outsource thinking, repeat, and over time, this pattern will define your cognitive baseline, not because you chose it consciously, but because you never interrupted it. So here's the real question. Not whether you understand the system, but whether you are willing to disrupt it. Because seeing the loop is one thing. Breaking it is something else entirely. At this point, you understand more than most people ever will. You see the pattern. You recognize the loop. You can probably identify moments in your own day where the system is running almost automatically. But understanding is not the same as change. And this is where most people quietly fail. They listen. They agree. They feel a brief moment of clarity. And then they return to the same behaviors. Nothing shifts. Let me ask you something directly. Are you listening to this as information, or are you treating this as a decision point? Because there is a difference. One keeps you comfortable. The other requires action. Right now, you are sitting in a rare moment of awareness. You can see the cost of your current habits. You can see where your focus is being lost. You can see how your mind is being trained day by day into something weaker. Most people will do nothing with that awareness. They will finish this, feel slightly motivated, and then reach their phone without even noticing, and the loop will continue. So decide now. Not later. Not tomorrow. Now. Are you going to keep consuming ideas, or are you going to start applying them? Because what comes next is not theory. It is a system. And it will only work if you stop observing and start participating. Now we move out of awareness and into execution. Because nothing you've understood so far will matter unless it becomes behavior. Not occasionally. Daily. Deliberately. What I'm going to give you is not a routine built on motivation. It is a system designed to rebuild your cognitive strength by reintroducing something your brain has been avoiding: friction. controlled, intentional mental resistance. This is what forces adaptation. This is what rebuilds attention. This is what restores clarity. And the system is simple, but not easy. That distinction matters. We'll call it the active retrieval protocol. Not because it sounds impressive, but because retrieval is the missing function in most modern thinking. You don't need more input. You need to strengthen your ability to hold, process, and recall. That's where your power is. Let's begin. The first element is space retrieval. Not passive review, not rereading. Retrieval. This means forcing your brain to recall information without looking at the source. Here's what most people do. They read something. They highlight it. They go back and read it again later. And they believe they are learning. They're not. They are recognizing. And recognition is weak. It gives the illusion of understanding without building the structure of memory. Retrieval is different. When you try to recall something from memory, when you struggle to bring it back, your brain activates the hippocampus. It strengthens the neural pathways associated with that information. It makes the memory more accessible the next time. Let me ask you something. Have you ever been sure you understood something until you tried to explain it? And suddenly, the clarity disappeared? That's the gap between recognition and retrieval. And most people live in recognition, which is why nothing sticks. So here's what you do. Every day, take one idea you've learned, close the book, put away the source, and spend 5 to 10 minutes forcing yourself to recall it. Not perfectly, but actively. Write it down. Say it out loud. Reconstruct it from memory. At first, this will feel frustrating. You will forget pieces. You will hesitate. You will feel slow. Good. That is the point. That discomfort is the signal that your brain is working. Now here's the mistake people make. They quit too early. They feel the resistance and assume something is wrong. So they go back to the source immediately. They remove the struggle. And with it, they remove the growth. Stay with it longer than you want to, even if it feels inefficient. Because what feels inefficient in the moment is building efficiency at the structural level. The second element is deep reading. This is where you begin to repair your attention span. Because right now, your attention is fragmented, not because you lack discipline, but because it has been trained to expect interruption. So we reverse that. You take one piece of material, a book, a long-form article, something that requires thought, and you commit to reading it for 20 to 30 minutes without interruption. No phone, no switching tabs, no checking anything, just sustained attention. Now understand what will happen. Within the first few minutes, your brain will resist. You will feel the urge to move, to check something, to escape. That urge is not random. It is withdrawal from stimulation. Your brain is recalibrating. And this is where most people fail. They interpret that discomfort as a sign to stop. You need to reinterpret it. That discomfort is the training. It is the exact moment your attention is being rebuilt. Stay there. Let me give you a real scenario. You sit down with a book. 3 minutes in, your mind drifts. 5 minutes in, you feel restless. At minute 7, you reach for your phone. Now pause. That moment, right before you reach, that is the edge. If you cross it, you reinforce the old loop. If you stay, you begin to break it. So you sit, you keep reading. Slowly, something shifts. Your mind stabilizes. The words begin to hold. The meaning becomes clearer. And by the end of that session, you feel something rare, mental solidity, not stimulation, not excitement. Clarity. That is what you are rebuilding. Now here's the common mistake. People try to do this while keeping distractions nearby. Phone on the table. Notifications on. They assume they can resist. You won't. Not consistently. So remove the option entirely. This is not about willpower. It is about environment. The third element is teaching out loud. This is where your understanding becomes structured, because thinking silently allows vagueness. You can feel like you understand something without ever organizing it. But the moment you try to explain it out loud, that vagueness disappears. You either know it or you don't. So after you learn something, after you read, after you study, you take 3 to 5 minutes and explain it, as if you are teaching someone else. Out loud, not in your head. Use simple language. Force clarity. If you get stuck, that's the point. That's where your understanding is incomplete. Go back. Fill the gap. Then explain it again. This process does something critical. It forces your brain to organize information into coherent structure. Not fragments. Not scattered ideas. But something usable. Let me ask you something. How many things have you learned that you couldn't explain clearly if someone asked you right now? That gap is where most people live. Teaching closes it. Now here's the resistance. People feel uncomfortable speaking out loud to themselves. It feels strange, unnatural, so they skip it. And in doing so, they skip one of the most powerful forms of cognitive training available. Ignore the discomfort. Use it. Because again, discomfort is the signal. The fourth element is the most immediate and the most difficult for most people. Morning cognitive protection. This is where everything begins. Because the first hour of your day sets the tone for your brain state. Right now, most people begin their day with input, phone, notifications, information. They flood their mind before it has even stabilized. And that creates immediate fragmentation. So you reverse it. For the first 30 to 60 minutes of your day, no phone, no external input. Instead, you choose one cognitively demanding activity. Reading, writing, planning. Something that requires thought. This does two things. It protects your baseline. And it trains your brain to start the day with effort, not stimulation. Now understand this clearly. This will feel uncomfortable. You will feel the urge to check your phone. Strongly. That urge is not weakness. It is conditioning. And this is your first opportunity each day to break it. Let me give you a simple structure. You wake up. You sit down. You read for 20 minutes. No interruptions. Then you spend 5 minutes recalling what you read. Then you explain it out loud. In less than 30 minutes, you have activated your memory, your attention, and your ability to articulate. You have done more for your brain than most people do all day. Now here's the mistake. People say, I don't have time. But the reality is different. They have time. They just spend it on low-value input. Scrolling. Checking. Consuming. You are not adding something new. You are replacing something that is weakening you. So let's bring this together. Spaced retrieval strengthens memory. Deep reading rebuilds attention. Teaching creates clarity. Morning protection sets the foundation. This is not complex, but it is demanding because it requires you to stop choosing ease and start choosing effort, deliberately, daily. Let me ask you one more question before we move forward. If you applied this consistently for 30 days, who would you become? Sharper, more focused, more articulate, more in control. That version of you is not theoretical. It is waiting on the other side of discipline. The only question is, will you do the work to reach it? Slow down for a moment. Not everything in your life needs speed. Some things require stillness because without it, you never actually see what is happening. Up to this point, you've heard the mechanisms. You've seen the patterns. You've been given the system. But none of that matters if you don't confront something deeper, the way you have been treating your own mind. Because this is not just about habits. It's about identity. It's about what you believe your mind is for. Let me ask you something. Honestly, not quickly, not automatically. Honestly, do you treat your mind like something to be trained or something to be entertained? Because your daily behavior already answers that question. Every time you reach for easy stimulation instead of effort, every time you avoid something mentally demanding, every time you choose distraction over depth, you are making a decision about who you are becoming. Not once, but repeatedly. And those repetitions become identity. You don't wake up one day and suddenly feel less sharp. You become less sharp one avoided moment at a time. Think about your average day. Not the ideal version. The real one. How often do you sit in silence without reaching for input? How often do you push through confusion instead of escaping it? How often do you actually finish a thought without interruption? Or has your mind become a place where everything starts and nothing fully develops? Let that question sit for a moment, because that is where depth is lost, not in dramatic failure, but in incomplete thinking. Now consider this. If someone observed your behavior for 1 week, just one, would they conclude that you are training your mind or neglecting it? Would they see discipline or dependency? Would they see someone building cognitive strength or someone slowly outsourcing it? This is not about judgment. It is about awareness. Because most people never step outside their own patterns long enough to evaluate them. They live inside the loop. They normalize it. They adapt to it. And over time, they forget what a clear, strong, focused mind actually feels like. Let me ask you something else. When was the last time you experienced real mental resistance? Not mild boredom, not slight inconvenience, but true cognitive strain. The kind that forces you to slow down, to think harder, to stay with something longer than you want to. If the answer is rarely or never, then your brain is not being challenged. And if it is not being challenged, it is being reduced. That is not an opinion. That is biology. Now take this one step further. Imagine yourself 5 years from now. Not a different life. Not a different environment. Just a continuation of your current patterns. The same morning habits. the same level of distraction, the same avoidance of difficulty. What does your mind look like? Sharper? More focused? More disciplined? Or more scattered? More dependent? More fatigued? Be honest, because that future is not abstract. It is being built right now. Through repetition, through neglect, through small decisions that feel insignificant in the moment, but compound over time. And here is the uncomfortable truth. No one is coming to protect your mind. Not your job, not technology, not the environment you live in. In fact, most systems around you are designed to do the opposite, to capture your attention, to hold it, to fragment it, to monetize it, which means one thing. If you do not take responsibility for your cognitive state, someone else will shape it for you. Let that settle, because this is not just about productivity. This is about autonomy, your ability to think clearly, to focus deeply, to make decisions without being pulled in 10 different directions. That is power. And most people are slowly giving it away. Not because they want to, but because they are not paying attention. So here is the final question for you in this moment. Not what you understand, not what you agree with, but what you are willing to change. Are you ready to feel uncomfortable again? Are you ready to sit with difficulty instead of escaping it? Are you ready to rebuild a mind that can hold focus, process deeply, and think independently? Or will you return to the same patterns and let this awareness fade like everything else? Because this is the moment where clarity either becomes action or disappears. Now you see the pattern, not just in theory, but in your own behavior. And here is where the situation becomes more serious than most people are willing to admit. Because your attention is not just being distracted, it is being targeted. Every platform you use, every app you open, every feed you scroll is designed with one objective: to capture your focus and hold it for as long as possible. Not to strengthen your mind, not to improve your thinking, but to keep you engaged, continuously, effortlessly. And the more time you spend inside these systems, the more they learn how to keep you there. They adapt to your behavior, your preferences, your weaknesses, until eventually the experience feels personalized, comfortable, almost necessary. But beneath that comfort, something is happening. Your ability to direct your own attention is being reduced, gradually, systematically. Because every time you follow the path of least resistance, every time you choose passive consumption over active thinking, you are reinforcing a version of yourself that is easier to control, easier to influence, easier to keep inside the loop. Think about that. This is not just about productivity. This is about autonomy. Because a person who cannot control their attention cannot control their direction. And a person without direction does not build anything meaningful. They react, they drift, they consume, but they do not create. They do not think deeply.
They do not develop clarity.
And over time, that lack of control compounds into something far more permanent: dependence. You begin to rely on external input to feel engaged, to feel stimulated, to feel normal. Silence becomes uncomfortable. Stillness becomes unfamiliar. And thinking, real thinking, feels like effort you'd rather avoid. This is the point where decline accelerates. Not dramatically, but quietly, because now The system no longer needs to pull you in. You go willingly. You reach for it automatically. You default to it without question. And this is where most people stay. For years. Let me be direct. If nothing changes, nothing improves. But more importantly, if nothing changes, something is lost. Not all at once, but piece by piece. Your focus, your memory, your ability to stay with a problem long enough to solve it, your tolerance for difficulty, your confidence in your own thinking. All of it begins to erode. And the most dangerous part? You adjust to it. You call it normal. You stop expecting more from yourself. So understand this clearly. Inaction is not neutral. You are not maintaining your current level. You are moving, either toward strength or toward decline. There is no middle ground. And right now, whether you like it or not, you are already in motion. So now the question is no longer whether you understand the problem. You do. The question is whether you are willing to act with discipline when there is no pressure forcing you to. Because this is where most people break. Not in moments of crisis, but in moments of freedom. When no one is watching. When there is no immediate consequence. When the easier option is right in front of them, and the harder one requires intention. That is where your mind is either rebuilt or slowly abandoned. Discipline, in this context, is not intensity. It is not extreme effort. It is not forcing yourself into exhaustion. Discipline is something much quieter, much more controlled. It is a decision to choose cognitive effort when ease is available. Again and again, without negotiation. You wake up. Your hand reaches for your phone. And in that moment, you interrupt it. Not dramatically. Not emotionally. Simply deliberately. You put the phone down. You sit in the silence. You pick up something that requires thought. And you begin. That is discipline. You sit with a difficult concept. Your mind resists. You feel the urge to escape. And instead of following it, you stay. You think. You struggle. You work through it. That is discipline. You finish reading. Instead of moving on, you pause. You recall. You explain. You force clarity. That is discipline. It does not look impressive from the outside. There is no visible reward, no immediate validation. But internally, something is changing. Your brain is adapting, rebuilding pathways, strengthening connections, restoring capacity. And over time, those small decisions accumulate, not into motivation, but into identity. You stop being someone who avoids effort. You become someone who engages with it. You stop depending on stimulation. You begin to generate focus. You stop doubting your ability to think clearly because you prove it to yourself daily. Let me be clear about something. You will not feel like doing this. Not consistently. There will be mornings where your mind feels slow, where distraction feels easier, where effort feels unnecessary. And those are the moments that matter most, because discipline is not built when it is convenient. It is built when it is resisted. If you wait until you feel ready, you will stay exactly where you are. So remove the negotiation. Do not ask yourself if you feel like protecting your mind. Decide that you do, and act accordingly. Start tomorrow. not with a complete overhaul, but with one controlled decision. Protect the first hour of your day. No phone, no input, just focus, deliberate effort. Read something that challenges you. Recall it. Explain it. That's it. 1 hour, but done correctly. Because if you can control the beginning of your day, you begin to regain control of your mind. And once you regain control of your mind, everything else becomes possible. Clarity, focus, depth, all of it returns. Not instantly, but inevitably, if you stay consistent. So this is not a suggestion. It is a requirement. If you want to remain sharp, if you want to think clearly, if you want to operate at a level that most people slowly drift away from, you must reintroduce difficulty into your life. Deliberately, daily, without compromise, because your mind will not stay strong on its own. It will only become as powerful as the demands you place on it. And right now, the only thing standing between you and that version of yourself is whether you are willing to do the work. If you are ready to stop letting your mind weaken through neglect and start training it with intention, then this is your standard, not entertainment, not passive listening. Commitment. Subscribe and step into a space where discipline is expected, not optional. Hetchu